A millionaire made fun of a simple elderly man, but the ending was heartbreaking. Really? You really think you can afford that car? Salesman Victor Brennan's voice echoed through the showroom of luxury dealership Prestige Motors, loud enough for every customer in attendance to turn their heads. Mr. Henry Wallace, 71, stood motionless in front of the silver Mercedes-AMG GT, his worn coat contrasting brutally with the impeccable shine of the vehicles around him. His calloused hands, marked by decades of manual labor, rested gently on the wooden cane. "I was just admiring," Henry replied in a calm voice, almost a whisper. Victor let out a short laugh and approached, his Italian shoes clicking on the polished marble floor. "Admiring is one thing, old man, but you're wasting my time. I have real clients waiting." He gestured to a young executive who had just walked in, all smiles and enthusiasm. Regional Manager Marcus Webb watched the scene from his glass-enclosed second-floor office, arms crossed, a satisfied smile on his face. Victor was his star salesman precisely for this reason. He knew how to filter who deserved attention and who was just wasting valuable time. Henry nodded slowly and started to walk away, but something in his eyes caught the attention of Sarah Chen, the receptionist, who had only worked there for 3 months. It wasn't shame, it wasn't humiliation, it was something different, a deep serenity, as if this moment was exactly what he had hoped would happen. "Sir, wait." Sarah stood up from the table, ignoring Victor's warning look. "Would you like a coffee while I check out our available models?" Victor practically jumped between them. "Sarah, don't waste company resources. You were leaving, weren't you?" He practically pushed Henry towards the revolving glass door. While walking through the parking lot, Henry stopped next to an old 1987 Ford with faded paint and a bumper held together with wire. Victor, who had gone to the door to make sure the invader really left, let out another laugh. "Of course. Perfect match," he shouted, his voice carrying through the afternoon air. "Maybe I'll come back when I win the lottery, Grandpa." What Victor didn't see was Henry taking a telephone from the inside pocket of his worn coat, not just any ordinary device, but a state-of-the-art business model. His fingers, despite their age, typed with impressive precision a short message. "Confirmed. Proceed as planned." Inside the dealership, Marcus Webb came down the stairs, hitting Victor on the back. "Excellent job filtering the clientele. We can't let just anyone come in here and affect our image of exclusivity." "I learned from the best, boss," Victor replied, straightening his expensive tie. "People like that old man need to understand their place in the world. There are establishments suitable for every social class." Sarah bit her lip, returning to her desk. It was her first week working in luxury sales, coming from a smaller dealership on the other side of town. Something about that interaction bothered her deeply, not just the gratuitous cruelty, but the satisfaction with which it was carried out. At 5:43 p.m., Marcus's corporate phone rang. Private number. He ignored it, focused on closing a sale of 3 vehicles to a technology company. At 5:51 p.m. it rang again. This time he answered with irritation. "Marcus Webb." "Mr. Webb, this is Jonathan Price from the Prestige International Corporate Office. I need you to be available for an urgent video conference tomorrow at 9 a.m. Non-negotiable." Marcus frowned. Price was 3 levels above him in the hierarchy, regional director of all East Coast dealerships. "Of course, Mr. Price. May I ask what this is about?" "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Webb. The call has been terminated." That night, as Victor celebrated another profitable day at an expensive downtown bar, posting photos of $50 drinks on social media, Henry Wallace sat in a modest but impeccably organized office. On the wall behind him, framed diplomas from Harvard Business School and MIT. On the table, an open laptop displayed complex spreadsheets and detailed financial reports. Beside her, a young woman of approximately 30 years old, her hair tied in a professional bun, was typing quickly. "All documents are ready, Grandpa. The property transfer will be executed at 8:45 a.m. tomorrow." "Thanks, Amanda," Henry replied, his tired but determined eyes fixed on the screen. "Your father would be proud to see how you took over the family business." Amanda stopped typing, her expression softening momentarily. "Dad always said you were the wisest man he ever knew. Now I understand why he insisted on taking this test himself." Henry sighed, taking a photo framed on the table. A young man in a military uniform, wide smile, eyes full of life. "Your father taught me that character is revealed not in how we treat our superiors, but in how we treat those who can seemingly do nothing for us." Marcus and Victor failed the most important test. "And Sarah?" Amanda asked. A small smile crossed Henry's wrinkled face. "Sarah Chen. 3 months of experience, no significant sales yet, but she was the only person in that entire showroom who saw a human being, where others saw just a nuisance. That says it all." The clock on the wall said 11:17 p.m., In less than 10 hours, Prestige Motors would learn a truth that would completely transform the lives of everyone involved. And while Victor would sleep peacefully, dreaming of future commissions, and Marcus would mentally review his sales achievements, neither of them had any idea that this seemingly trivial encounter with a simple old man was about to rewrite their entire future. Henry picked up his phone again, this time opening a notes app. Every detail of the interaction was recorded there. Exact time, words used, witnesses present, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Her son-in-law had died 3 years ago, leaving Amanda with an empire of 47 dealerships to manage alone, and Henry, who had built that empire from scratch after emigrating with just $200 in his pocket, knew that evaluating the integrity of the team was as important as evaluating the numbers on the balance sheet. "Do they realize," Henry murmured more to himself, "that true wealth is never in what we wear or drive but in how we make others feel? If you're wondering how a simple old man in a shabby coat could completely change the fate of a luxury dealership and the people who worked there, keep watching, because sometimes appearances don't just deceive, they reveal truths that some people spend their entire lives trying to hide." And when the clock struck 9 a.m. the next morning, Marcus Webb would discover that underestimating someone based on appearances wasn't just cruel, it was the costliest mistake he would make in his entire career. The next morning, Marcus Webb arrived at the dealership at 8:30 a.m., earlier than usual. Jonathan Price's call had planted a seed of unrest that kept him from sleeping well. He mentally reviewed the quarter's sales figures, all in the black, exceeding targets. There was no reason to worry. Victor was already in the showroom, polishing the hood of a newly arrived Porsche Taycan, whistling happily. "Good morning, boss. Ready to close more deals today?" "Video conference with Price at 9 a.m., Marcus replied dryly. "Probably wants to congratulate us on our performance." Sarah Chen arrived promptly at 8:45 a.m., immediately noticing the tension in the air. She had spent the night thinking about the elderly man from the day before, unable to shake the feeling that something important had escaped everyone. At 8:57 a.m., the corporate email system issued an alert. Marcus clicked absent-mindedly as he prepared for the video conference. The sender was from Prestige International's legal department. Subject: notification of change of ownership. Immediate action required. His heart sped up. Change of ownership? Impossible. Prestige Motors has been owned by the corporation for 15 years. Before he could open the attachment, the computer screen flashed, automatically starting the video call. Jonathan Price showed up, but he wasn't alone. At his side, Amanda Wallace, wearing an impeccable business suit, hair loose now, projecting absolute authority. "Good morning, Mr. Webb," Price began, his voice formal and cold. "Allow me to introduce Amanda Wallace, new majority owner of Prestige Motors and 46 other dealerships in our network." Marcus felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Sorry, new owner. I don't understand." "At 8:45 this morning," Amanda interrupted, her voice clear and professional, "Wallace Automotive Group's acquisition of 73% of the shares of Prestige International was finalized. My grandfather, Henry Wallace, founded this group 52 years ago. I have run it since my father's death." The name hit Marcus like a punch in the gut. Wallace. The old man from yesterday was called Henry Wallace. "Yesterday afternoon," Amanda continued, opening a folder, "my grandfather personally visited your dealership as part of an integrity assessment we conduct on all of our potential acquisitions. He was greeted by you and your salesman, Victor Brennan, with what I can only describe as blatant discrimination and degrading treatment." Victor, who had approached upon hearing raised voices coming from the office, paled visibly through the glass window. "This must be a misunderstanding," Marcus stuttered, sweat forming on his forehead. "We receive dozens of visitors daily. There is no harm, understood," Price cut in dryly. "We have complete audio recording of the incident, provided by Mr. Wallace himself. He uses a hearing aid with a recording function, installed after a partial hearing problem 3 years ago. Completely legal since the recording was made in a commercial public space." Amanda touched a tablet and Victor's voice echoed over the call. "Really? Do you really think you can afford that car? You're wasting my time." Then Marcus's voice. "Excellent job filtering the clientele. We can't let just anyone come in here." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah, standing in the office doorway, covered her mouth with her hands. "Mr. Webb," Amanda continued, "Wallace Automotive Group's core values include human dignity, respectful treatment of each customer regardless of appearance, and integrity over profit. You and Mr. Brennan violated all of these principles in less than 10 minutes. Please, Ms. Wallace," Marcus tried to recover. "Let me explain our client qualification process." "Qualification process?" Amanda leaned forward. "Do you mean discrimination based on appearance?" My grandfather built this empire starting as a car wash, Mr. Webb. He arrived in the United States with shabby clothes and a strong accent. People like you would have kicked him out without giving him a chance. And yet he built something greater than you will ever understand. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in years, I was completely unresponsive. Victor Brennan is fired effective immediately, Amanda declared. No compensation, no letter of recommendation. Your conduct is indefensible. As for you, Mr. Webb, your position as regional manager is being reevaluated. Over the next 48 hours, a full audit of your management practices will be conducted. Victor burst into the office at that moment, his face red with fury and panic. This is ridiculous. I was just doing my job. We sell luxury cars. I can't waste time on people who clearly have more money and integrity than you ever will, Amanda interrupted coldly. Security will escort you out of the building in 10 minutes. Collect your personal belongings. Try to take any company documents and you will face legal action. You can't do this, Victor shouted, but his voice was shaking. I'm the best salesman at this dealership. I have rights. You have the right to leave with dignity or be removed by security, Jonathan Price interjected. Choose wisely. As Victor was escorted out by 2 security guards who had arrived with impressive efficiency, Sarah remained paralyzed, processing how quickly everything had fallen apart. The colleague who had been celebrating his sales 24 hours ago was now being escorted like a criminal. Marcus, still on the video conference, tried one last trick. Mrs. Wallace, please consider my 12 years of service to the company. I always achieved my goals. Always at the expense of what, Mr. Webb? Amanda cut him off. Always discriminating against those who didn't wear the right clothes. Always teaching your team that profit matters more than humanity. The impressive numbers that you value so much. How many of them came from genuine customers versus aggressive sales and questionable practices? The audit over the next few days would reveal just that, but Marcus already knew the answer. Pressure techniques, hidden markups in contracts, selling unnecessary extended warranties to confused elderly customers, all legal but morally repugnant. There is, however, Amanda continued, her expression softening slightly, one person on your team who has demonstrated exactly the values we seek. Sarah Chen. Sarah took a step back, surprised. Me? You were the only person in that showroom who saw my grandfather as a human being deserving of basic respect. She was the only one who offered assistance without judging appearances. These qualities are exactly what Wallace Automotive Group looks for in leaders. Leaders? Sarah repeated in disbelief. Depending on the results of Mr. Webb's audit, Amanda explained, we may need a new regional manager, someone who understands that we're in the business of building relationships, not just pushing products. Would you be interested in a substantial promotion, Miss Chen? Tears formed in Sarah's eyes. In 3 months of work, being constantly ignored by Marcus and ridiculed by Victor for not being aggressive enough in sales, she never imagined this moment. Yes, it would be, she managed to reply. Excellent. Human Resources will contact you. For now, you will take over as interim manager until the audit is completed. Marcus slumped in his chair, the weight of his choices crushing him, or completely. 12 years of career, destroyed in less than 24 hours, and all because he couldn't see beyond a shabby coat and a wooden cane. That afternoon, as Sarah tried to process her sudden promotion by organizing files in the office that still smelled of Marcus's expensive cologne, she found a folder hidden at the bottom of a locked drawer. Priority customers, said the label. Inside, detailed profiles, all of white, wealthy customers with a history of repeat purchases. A second folder, recommended filtering, contained notes about types to be subtly discouraged. His stomach dropped. This wasn't just Victor's individual bias. It was documented institutional policy. She photographed each page and sent it directly to Amanda Wallace. Meanwhile, in his modest home on the outskirts of town, Henry Wallace sat on his porch, a glass of iced tea in hand, watching the sun set. Your phone rang. Amanda, we found systematic evidence, Grandpa. This goes deeper than we imagined. Henry sighed, but he wasn't surprised. 52 years building this business, Amanda. I've seen it all. The difference between good and bad people is not what they have, but how they treat those who seemingly have nothing to offer. Victor is already posting on social media, Amanda informed with a touch of irony, saying that he was the victim of a trap and that he is going to sue for unfair dismissal. Henry laughed softly. Let him try. Audio recordings in commercial establishments are perfectly legal, and something tells me other customers have stories to tell about his behavior too. He was absolutely right. Over the next few hours, Victor's outraged post would be flooded with comments from former customers reporting similar treatment. People dismissed, ridiculed, judged for not driving the right cars or not wearing the right clothes when entering the dealership. The internet is unforgiving. and Victor was finding that out the hard way. Every share, every comment, every additional story built a digital monument to his arrogance. Recruitment firms he desperately contacted would Google his name and find just that, a warning about what happens when you treat people like disposable objects. Marcus, in turn, spent the night in his luxurious, empty apartment, rereading emails from the scheduled audit. Each line was a reminder of how many times he had chosen numbers over people, profit over principles. The cruel irony was that Henry Wallace, the man he had helped humiliate, had built an empire based on exactly the opposite principles, and was now infinitely more successful than Marcus would ever be. What none of them yet fully understood was that this was just the beginning. Henry Wallace hadn't bought 47 dealerships just to teach a moral lesson. There was a bigger plan, decades in the making, about to unfold, and when the dust settled, the entire luxury automotive industry would be forced to confront uncomfortable truths about how it really treated its customers. But for now, on that silent night, one thing was crystal clear. Underestimating someone based on appearances was not just morally wrong, it was, in a world where a simple old man could be the secret owner of billions in assets, the most devastating and costly mistake anyone could make. And Victor Brennan and Marcus Webb were just beginning to pay the full price for that brutal lesson. 3 weeks after Victor's dismissal and the start of Marcus's audit, Prestige Motors was operating under a completely different atmosphere. Sarah Chen, now interim manager, had implemented changes that seemed small on paper, but were revolutionary in practice. Mandatory training on unconscious bias, a customer is a customer policy regardless of appearance, and an anonymous system for reporting discrimination. But as the dealership adapted to the new reality, Henry Wallace was executing the second phase of a much larger plan, a plan that Amanda was barely beginning to understand. "Grandpa, we need to talk about the other reports," Amanda said, walking into his office with a bulky folder. "We visited 31 of the 47 dealerships undercover. The results are disturbing." Henry adjusted his reading glasses, examining the documents. In Miami, a salesman had literally escorted a Hispanic family out, claiming, "This is not the place for you." In Chicago, a well-dressed black woman was followed by security while admiring vehicles, as if she were going to steal. In Seattle, a disabled war veteran was ignored for 45 minutes while salespeople served younger customers. "It's not just an isolated problem," Henry murmured, his voice carrying decades of experience. "Similar ions. It's systemic, cultural." Amanda sat up, rubbing her temples. "Father always said you built this empire with dignity. How did we let it turn into this?" "We didn't, honey. It happened slowly, when we prioritized profit over people, when we hired managers who saw numbers over human beings, when we allowed efficiency to become code for discrimination." That same day, in a small apartment across town, Victor Brennan was sitting at his computer, responding to the same job ad for the 20th time. His attempt to sue Wallace Automotive for unfair dismissal had been summarily dismissed. The recordings were legal, the witnesses confirmed every detail, and his own history of customer complaints, carefully documented by human resources over the years, destroyed any exemplary employee argument. His phone vibrated. Message from a former colleague. "Man, you need to see this." The link led to an article in the Wall Street Journal. Wallace Automotive Group announces National Inclusion Initiative following incidents of discrimination at multiple dealerships. The article detailed not only the incident with Henry, but revealed a systematic pattern across dozens of locations. Diversity experts were quoted, shocking statistics were presented, and at the center of it all was the photo of Henry Wallace, not as a victim, but as a reformer determined to transform an entire industry. Mr. Wallace, 71, who built his empire starting as a penniless immigrant, is now investing $50 million in a national training program on unconscious bias and inclusive sales practices, the article explained. Victor closed the laptop tightly. $50 million. That simple old man he had casually kicked out was investing $50 million to ensure that no one else would be treated like he had treated Henry. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb sat in a cold conference room, facing 3 internal audit investigators. In the last 21 days, every decision he had made in the last 5 years had been scrutinized, and the picture that emerged was devastating. "Mr. Webb, we found 127 documented instances where potential clients were discouraged based on appearance or ethnicity," Chief Auditor Dr. Patricia Mendez read from her report. "Your salespeople followed an ideal customer profile that you created and distributed yourself, a profile that systematically excluded people of color, the elderly, and anyone who did not meet a specific economic standard based purely on appearance." "I was just maximizing efficiency." Marcus tried to defend himself, but his voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Time is money in luxury sales. Time is money, Dr. Mendez repeated slowly. So do you consider that discriminating against people saves time? Mr. Webb, we calculate that your efficiency has cost the company approximately $8.7 million in lost sales over the last 3 years. People who were judged and discarded, but who had full financial purchasing capacity. Marcus paled. That's not possible. It's very possible. In fact, one of the clients your team filtered was a technology executive who ended up purchasing a fleet of 12 luxury vehicles from a competitor. Another was a plastic surgeon who planned to buy graduation gifts for his 3 children, all discarded because they didn't look like his ideal clients. The silence in the room was oppressive. Marcus realized too late that his prejudice was not just morally repugnant, it was a complete financial disaster. Back in Henry's office, Amanda connected her laptop to a projector. We need to discuss the next step. Firing all the problem managers will create operational chaos. We're not going to fire everyone, Henry replied calmly. We will give a choice. Every manager with a problematic history will participate in an intensive 6-month re-education program. Anyone who refuses or fails is out. Anyone who accepts and demonstrates genuine change can stay. And Marcus? Henry was silent for a long moment, looking out the window. Marcus Webb has had 12 years to question his practices. He's had dozens of opportunities to choose differently. He doesn't deserve more chances, but he deserves to understand why he failed. The next day, Marcus received his formal notice of dismissal, but along with it came something unexpected, a personal letter from Henry Wallace. Mr. Webb, during 52 years of building this business, I learned that true luxury is not in the vehicles we sell, but in the dignity with which we treat each person who walks through our doors. You failed not because you didn't meet sales targets, but because you forgot that every potential customer you discarded was someone who deserved basic respect. Someone who could be your father, your grandfather, your neighbor. I have been this discarded man countless times in my life. I arrived in the United States without speaking English properly, wearing secondhand clothes, driving old cars. People like you would have kicked me out without thinking twice. But some people saw me as a human being first and a customer second. These people changed my trajectory. You have a talent for sales, Mr. Webb, but talent without character is a dangerous tool. I hope you use this experience not as the end of your career, but as a new beginning of humanity. Sincerely, Henry Wallace. Marcus read the letter 3 times, tears silently streaming down his face, not from anger or self-pity, but from something deeper. The belated, painful recognition of how many lives he had negatively affected, how many opportunities he had destroyed, how much damage he had caused simply by being efficient in his cruelty. Sarah, now officially confirmed as regional manager following the audit, was completely reorganizing the training structure. She had invited diverse community groups to feedback sessions, implemented a mentoring program for salespeople from varied backgrounds, and was personally reviewing every customer interaction. Miss Chen, the receptionist called. There's someone here wanting to speak to the manager. Say it's personal. Sarah went down to the showroom and came across a woman in her 50s, dressed modestly, holding the hand of a teenage girl. Hello, I'm Teresa Morales, the woman began, her accent thick. I saw on the news about the changes here. I wanted to bring my daughter to see that places like this can treat us with respect. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. Please welcome. Would you like to see some models? Actually, Teresa smiled shyly. I came here 6 months ago to try to buy a car. I had just received an inheritance from my mother. The salesman, he laughed at me. He said I should look for something else within my reach and showed me the direction of a used car store. Victor, Sarah murmured. Yes, I ended up buying from another dealership, but when I saw that things changed here, I wanted my daughter to see it. I wanted her to know that some people really care about doing things differently. At that moment, Sarah completely understood the scope of what Henry Wallace was doing. It wasn't just about firing bad employees or implementing better policies. It was about restoring the dignity of every person who had been discarded, humiliated, judged. It was about proving that real change was possible. In the evening, Henry received a call from an unknown number. Mr. Wallace, this is Marcus Webb. I know you don't deserve to listen to me, but I read your letter. You are right about everything. I spent years building a career on cruel judgments and thinking that was success. I want to change. I don't know if it's possible, but I want to try. Henry was silent for a moment. Mr. Webb, genuine change is always possible, but it requires more courage than staying as you are. If you're really committed, I can refer you to a small business consulting program, helping entrepreneurs in underserved communities. No luxurious salary, no elegant office. I just work hard helping people who really need it. I accept, Marcus replied without hesitation, his voice breaking. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on so many others. As the clock ticked midnight, Henry hung up the phone and looked at the photo of his son-in-law, the man who had entrusted him with his empire, who believed that business could be simultaneously profitable and ethical. "We're getting there, David," Henry whispered to the photo. One changed heart at a time. What no one yet realized was that this was just the beginning of a much greater transformation. In executive boardrooms across the country, CEOs from other dealership chains nervously watched the changes at Wallace Automotive, some with admiration. Others were afraid that their own skeletons would be exposed. And everyone was asking the same thing. If a 71-year-old man could challenge an entire corrupt system, what was stopping his own clients from doing the same? The entire industry was about to discover that undervaluing someone based on appearance wasn't just morally wrong, it was the beginning of a revolution that no amount of money or power could stop. And as Henry Wallace finally allowed himself to sleep that night, he dreamed not of revenge or punishment, but of a world where no child would need to prove themselves before being granted basic dignity, because true justice, he knew, is not in destroying your enemies. It is in transforming them into allies for a better world. 6 months after the transformation of Prestige Motors, Wallace Automotive Group was about to realize its PR First National Service Excellence Meeting, an event that would bring together managers, salespeople, and executives from all 47 newly acquired dealerships. The location chosen was no accident: the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same building where, decades ago, Henry Wallace had been denied entry through the front door for not looking the part. Amanda took the stage in the main hall in front of 340 people. "Good morning, everyone. Before we begin the official introductions, I would like to share something personal." The screen behind her lit up, showing a photo of a young immigrant in front of a dilapidated gas station, 1973. "This is my grandfather, Henry Wallace, on his first day working in the United States, 23 years old, not speaking fluent English, wearing clothes he got from charity. He washed cars for $3 an hour." Murmurs ran through the audience. Some seemed genuinely surprised. Others, especially those who had narrowly survived the audit, looked uncomfortable. "Over the next few years," Amanda continued, "my grandfather was kicked out of dealerships a documented 17 times, simply for his appearance, for his accent, for driving old cars. People like many of you decided he didn't deserve even to be treated with basic respect." The silence was absolute now. But today we are not here to just talk about the past. We are here because in the last few weeks we have received 2,947 formal complaints from customers about discriminatory treatment at our dealerships. 2,847 people who have been judged, discarded, and humiliated. The screen changed, showing shocking statistics. 78% of complaints involved non-white customers. 43% involved people over 60 years old. 31% involved women shopping alone. "These aren't just statistics," Amanda declared, her voice gaining strength. "These are lives. These are dignities destroyed. These are lost sales because our people were too busy making bias-based judgments to recognize real customers." Across town, Victor Brennan watched the live broadcast on his cell phone, sitting in his now modest apartment after months of unemployment. Every word was a knife. He had attempted 127 job interviews. In 89 of them, when they Googled their name, the interview ended abruptly. His LinkedIn, once full of connections and accolades, was now a digital wasteland, people systematically removing it in the wake of the national scandal. At the event, Amanda gestured to the back of the room. "I'd like to introduce some people." 10 individuals took the stage: an elegant black lady, a veteran in a wheelchair, a young Hispanic woman, an elderly man with a cane, a man in a turban, a trans woman, each representing the type of customer who had been systematically discriminated against. "These people," Amanda explained, "were all customers who attempted to purchase luxury vehicles from our dealerships and were treated with disrespect, contempt, or outright kicked out. Each of them had the full financial ability to purchase. Each of them ended up buying from competitors. And today, each of them is here not to shame us, but to teach us." Teresa Morales, the woman who had visited Sarah months earlier, stepped forward. 8 months ago, I walked into Prestige Motors with $45,000 in inheritance. I wanted to buy my first new car. A salesman named Victor Brennan laughed at me and directed me to a used car lot. I bought a Mercedes from another dealership the same day." The veteran spoke next. "I lost my leg serving the country. I took an Uber to the Boston dealership because my converted car had broken down. I was followed by security for 30 minutes while salespeople completely ignored my presence. I bought a converted BMW from the competition the following week." Story after story piled up. These weren't isolated cases of bad salespeople. It was a systemic cultural pattern that Wallace Automotive had unknowingly perpetuated for years. Amanda returned to center stage. In total, we estimate that these discriminatory practices have cost our company $47 million in lost sales over the past 5 years. $47 million, because we have been effective in our bias. In the audience, Sarah Chen watched with tears in her eyes. She had been part of the problem by omission for months before that day with Henry. Now, as a regional manager, I was determined to be part of the solution. And now, Amanda announced, I'd like you to meet someone. Henry Wallace entered the stage, moving slowly with his cane, wearing the same shabby coat from his first visit to Prestige Motors. Recognition swept through the audience like a wave. Many there had read about him in the newspapers. Some worked at dealerships where he had made similar visits. "Good morning," Henry began, the calm voice echoing through the speakers. "I know many of you recognize me from the stories that have circulated. The simple old man who got kicked out of dealerships. But today, I didn't come here as a victim. I came as someone who built a multi-billion-dollar empire despite people like you trying to stop me at every step." He paused, letting the words sink in. "When I bought these 47 dealerships, it wasn't out of revenge. It was because I believe we can be better, that this industry can be profitable without being cruel, that we can sell luxury without selling our humanity in the process." In the room, a Seattle manager shakily raised his hand. "Mr. Wallace, how can we fix this? Some of us didn't realize what we were doing until it was too late." Henry nodded. "Awareness is the first step, but awareness without action is just comfortable guilt. Each of you has a choice today: genuinely commit to change or seek employment elsewhere, because there will be no middle ground at Wallace Automotive." Amanda regained control. "Starting today, all of our dealerships will implement the Wallace Dignity Protocol. Monthly mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds, quarterly equity assessments, bonuses based not just on sales volume, but on customer satisfaction from all demographics." The screen showed a graph. Dealers who fail 3 consecutive assessments will have management replaced. Salespeople with 3 confirmed complaints of discrimination will be fired immediately. No second chances this time. Then came the bomb. "And to make sure we take this seriously, my grandfather is personally donating $100 million to create the Luxury Commerce Equity Foundation, an organization that will audit not only our dealerships, but will offer free consulting to the entire automotive industry that wants to improve." The murmur that ran through the room was different now, genuine astonishment. Henry returned to the microphone. "And there's one more thing." He motioned for Sarah Chen to come on stage. "This young woman in her 3rd month on the job had the courage to treat a stranger with dignity when everyone around her treated them with contempt. That's why she is being promoted to Regional Director of Culture Implementation, overseeing the transformation of all 47 dealerships." Sarah covered her mouth, tears flowing freely. "From undervalued receptionist to regional executive in 6 months. Not through connections or politics, but through a simple act of humanity. And finally," Henry concluded, his voice carrying decades of experience and pain, "I want you to understand something fundamental. When they kicked that simple old man out of the dealership, they weren't just being cruel to me. They were being cruel to the 23-year-old version of myself, that scared immigrant who just wanted a chance. They were being cruel to their own mothers, grandmothers, neighbors, anyone who doesn't fit a narrow, toxic definition of ideal customer." At that time, the live broadcast had 340,000 views. Reports were already being written. Other dealership chains watched nervously, knowing their own skeletons were about to be exposed. Victor, watching from his empty apartment, turned off his cell phone and sat in the dark. He had lost not just a job but any chance of working in the industry again. Recruitment companies blocked his calls. Former colleagues ignored messages. The arrogance of a moment had destroyed an entire career. Marcus Webb, now working on a microcredit program for small entrepreneurs in underserved communities, watched with a mix of shame and hope. He had accepted Henry's offer: hard work, modest pay, but the chance to rebuild not his career, but his character. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something that really mattered. Back at the event, Henry made one last announcement. "Every person who has been discriminated against at our dealerships and documented their experience will receive a formal apology and a $5,000 voucher to use at any of our locations. Not to buy your silence, but to acknowledge that we failed you and want the chance to do better." The applause that followed was unlike any other. It was not a celebration of victory, but an acknowledgement of responsibility. People in the audience wept openly, confronting for the first time the real impact of their actions. As the event concluded and people dispersed, carrying the weight of new responsibilities and renewed hopes, an inescapable truth hung in the air. The luxury industry would never be the same. A 71-year-old man with a shabby coat and a wooden cane had done something that government regulations and lawsuits had failed to do. Victor forced an entire industry to look in the mirror and confront the ugliness it had normalized as a business practice. And as Henry walked slowly off the stage, supported by his granddaughter, he felt no triumph over defeated enemies. I felt hope that maybe, just maybe, the next generation of Henrys and Teresas and Sarahs wouldn't need to prove themselves before being granted basic dignity, that the price of admission to respect would no longer be the color of your skin, the age of your body, or the model of car you drove. But the story was far from over. Because as Wallace Automotive Group planted seeds of change, other companies watched with a mixture of awe and terror, knowing that the dignity revolution Henry had started wouldn't stop at dealerships. And in the coming months, the question that would echo in executive boardrooms across the country would be simple but terrifying. What if our customers did the same to us? 1 year after the National Service Excellence Summit, Wallace Automotive Group was not just profitable, it was a phenomenon. Sales had increased 34% across all remodeled dealerships, but the numbers only told half the story. The other half was in people. Sarah Chen walked through the Prestige Motors showroom, now rebranded as Prestige Automotive Center, removing the word motors, which Henry insisted sounded cold and mechanical, watching her staff interact with customers. A young salesman, Miguel Hernandez, was patiently explaining financing options to an elderly woman who had been kicked out of 3 dealerships before arriving here. "Miss Chen," Miguel called. "Ms. Patterson would like to test the hybrid model." Sarah smiled. Miguel had been hired 4 months ago, a former mechanic with no sales experience, but with something no amount of training could teach: genuine empathy. He was one of 127 new hires across the network, people chosen not for pedigree or connections, but for demonstrating core values of respect and dignity. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson," Sarah replied. "Miguel will take very good care of you." As he watched the test drive depart, his phone vibrated. Amanda Wallace. "Sarah, I just heard from the competition. Luxury Auto Group is implementing a program similar to ours. Our model is spreading." Sarah smiled. "Wasn't that exactly the point?" "Exactly. Grandpa is overjoyed. He says that when change becomes profitable, it stops being optional. It becomes a necessity for survival." On the other side of the city, in a modest office of a microcredit NGO, Marcus Webb was finishing the presentation of a business plan with a young Haitian entrepreneur who dreamed of opening a bakery. He had spent the last 6 months at that job, earning a third of what he had been paid as a regional manager, but feeling more fulfilled than he had in his entire previous career. "Your plan is solid, Marie," he said, closing the laptop. "I will recommend approval for the interest-free loan. You deserve this chance." Marie had tears in her eyes. "Mr. Webb, you don't know what that means. Every bank rejected me without even looking at my numbers." Marcus knew exactly what it meant. He had been that person who rejected without looking, who judged based on appearances, who wasted talents because they didn't fit into preconceived molds. The irony wasn't lost on him. It took losing everything to finally understand the value of taking chances. "Marie," he replied gently, "I learned the hard way that judging people by appearance isn't just cruel. It's dumb. You have talent, determination, and an excellent plan. The rest is just a matter of opportunity." That night, Marcus received an unexpected email. Sender, Henry Wallace. "Mr. Webb, my granddaughter informed me about the exceptional work she has done with entrepreneurs from underserved communities. His reports show an 89% success rate in the deals he helped structure, significantly above the national average. The Luxury Commerce Equity Foundation is expanding into a business mentoring program. I would like you to consider running this new division. It won't be a return to the luxury you once knew, but it will be a chance to multiply the impact you're already generating. People change when they choose to change. You chose. Sincerely, Henry Wallace." Marcus reread the email 5 times, unable to believe that the man he had helped humiliate was offering not just forgiveness, but reassurance. His hands shook as he typed the answer. "I accept. And Mr. Wallace, thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't see myself." Meanwhile, in a small cheap apartment in the suburbs, Victor Brennan watched the local news show Wallace Automotive's Socially Responsible Company of the Year award ceremony. Sarah Chen accepted the trophy on behalf of the entire organization, her speech emphasizing that real change began with individual choices to treat each person with dignity. Victor turned off the TV, unable to continue watching. 17 months after his dismissal, he still hadn't found a steady job. He had tried sales in other areas, real estate, insurance, even used cars, but his reputation preceded him. A simple Google search revealed dozens of articles, viral posts, and comments from former customers documenting years of arrogant behavior. His last interview had ended with the manager saying, "Victor, Your resume is impressive, but when I ask myself if I would trust you to represent our brand with integrity, I honestly can't say yes. He had lost not just a job, but any chance of rebuilding credibility in the only field he knew. The arrogance of a moment, multiplied by years of similar behavior, had destroyed an entire career. And unlike Marcus, who accepted responsibility and genuinely changed, Victor remained bitter, convinced he was the victim of over-the-top political correctness. On a cold October night, exactly 18 months after that fateful encounter, Henry Wallace sat on his porch, a blanket over his shoulders, looking at the stars. Amanda brought hot tea and sat down next to him. "Grandpa, I received final reports from all 47 dealerships. Customer satisfaction rate rose 61%, discrimination complaints fell 94%, and most impressively, sales to previously filtered communities increased by 340%. Henry nodded slowly, a small smile on his face. 340%, in other words, we were literally throwing money away along with our humanity. But it's not just about money, right? Amanda asked, even though she already knew the answer. It was never about the money, honey. It was about proving that success and decency are not mutually exclusive, that you can build an empire without destroying people in the process, that true excellence has no specific color, age, or appearance. Amanda took her grandfather's wrinkled hand. Dad would be proud. Your father, Henry replied, voice breaking, always knew that the greatest luxury is not the cars we sell, but the dignity with which we treat every human being. He built this business on that foundation. I just brought it back when it started to crack. The following month, the Wallace Automotive Group story made the cover of the Harvard Business Review, How Dignity Became the Most Profitable Business Strategy. The article detailed not just the financial transformation, but the massive social impact. 340 employees promoted from within, 89% of whom were from underrepresented communities. Dozens of other luxury companies implementing similar programs. A cultural shift beginning to spread. Teresa Morales, that woman Victor had kicked out 18 months ago, now worked as a diversity consultant for Wallace Automotive, using her experience to train salespeople about unconscious bias. Her daughter, inspired by the transformation she witnessed, was studying civil rights at university. Mom, the young woman said over dinner, I want to work on creating policies that prevent anyone from being treated the way you were treated. Teresa smiled, tears in her eyes. The best revenge, my daughter, is to transform your pain into change that prevents others from feeling the same pain. 2 years after the initial incident, Henry Wallace was invited to speak at the National Luxury Dealership Conference. The room was packed, 2,500 executives, many of whom had implemented similar changes in their own companies after witnessing the success of Wallace Automotive. When I walked into that dealership 2 years ago, Henry began, his voice steady despite his age, wearing a ratty coat and carrying a cane. I wasn't just rejected, I was ridiculed, dismissed, treated as less than human. And this wasn't an isolated failure of a bad salesperson. It was the result of a culture that normalized discrimination as business efficiency. The silence in the hall was absolute. But here's the truth that changed everything. That treatment cost me absolutely nothing. I didn't lose money, I didn't lose sleep, I didn't lose dignity. Do you know who lost? The dealership lost $8.7 million in sales over 3 years by filtering out customers who didn't seem profitable. Victor Brennan lost his career because being cruel eventually becomes his only reputation. Marcus Webb wasted years promoting toxic culture that benefited no one. He paused, looking around the room. The greatest revenge was not to fire them, expose them, or publicly humiliate them. The greatest revenge was proving that treating them more humanely than they treated me still produced better results for everyone. Marcus H.O.J. runs a program that helped 340 entrepreneurs from underserved communities open successful businesses. Sarah Chen, a receptionist who earned a promotion for a simple act of kindness, now oversees transformation across our entire network, and our company is more profitable than it has ever been, not despite treating people with dignity but precisely because of it. The applause that followed was not polite or formal. It was thunderous, prolonged, charged with recognition that something fundamental had changed. That night, as Henry was getting ready for bed, Amanda entered the room with news. Grandpa, Victor Brennan requested a meeting. He says he wants to talk about new beginnings. Henry was silent for a long moment. Schedule for next week. Everyone deserves a chance for genuine change. If Marcus could find redemption in hard work and humility, maybe Victor can too. But this time, you'll have to prove it through actions, not words. 3 years after the incident that started it all, Prestige Automotive Center was celebrating its transformation anniversary. The event brought together employees, customers, and community partners. Miguel Hernandez, now an assistant manager, was training a new salesperson, a young Syrian refugee who spoke English with a thick accent. "Remember, Amira," he said gently, "every person who walks through that door carries a story. Our job is not to judge the chapter we see, but to respect the entire journey." Sarah watched from afar, proud. This was the culture that Henry had restored, not just policies and training, but a genuine transformation of values that carried over naturally from person to person. Henry Wallace passed away peacefully at age 74, 3 years after that dealership encounter. His funeral brought together thousands, not just family members and executives, but ordinary people whose lives he had touched. Salespeople who were given second chances, customers who were treated with dignity when others dismissed them, entrepreneurs who were given opportunities when every bank turned them down. Marcus Webb was there, holding the hand of Marie, whose bakery now had 3 locations and employed 27 people. Teresa Morales was there with her daughter, now a lawyer working on anti-discrimination legislation. Sarah Chen, now CEO of Wallace Automotive Group, gave the eulogy. "Henry Wallace taught me that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in preserved dignities. That true power is not in crushing those who despise you, but in raising them to a better standard. That the best revenge for cruelty is not to repay cruelty, but to build a world where cruelty becomes obsolete because kindness is simply more profitable, more efficient, more humane." His voice broke. He could have destroyed Victor and Marcus. He could have publicly exposed and ruined lives for revenge, but they chose something infinitely more powerful. They chose to prove that their success did not have to come at the expense of the dignity of others. And in doing so, he changed not just one company but an entire industry. Victor Brennan stood at the back of the room, tears flowing silently. Over the past 2 years, working at a community center teaching at-risk youth about career development, he had finally understood what Henry had tried to teach. The public humiliation he suffered was not punishment. It was the natural consequence of years of treating people like disposable objects. And true redemption came not from Henry offering him forgiveness, but from Victor finally understanding why he needed him. At night, when everyone left, Amanda remained alone in front of the newly closed tomb. "You did it, Grandpa. It changed thousands of lives. He proved that dignity and profit are not enemies, that true excellence begins with basic respect." She placed a single white rose on the grave. "The best revenge, you always said, is not making your enemies suffer. It's doing something so extraordinary with your pain that it transforms not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. You didn't just survive cruelty, you turned it into fuel for revolution." Henry Wallace's legacy wasn't in the 47 dealerships, the billions in assets, or the newspaper headlines. "I was among the 127 people promoted who would never have received chances. In the 2,147 customers who were treated with dignity when they expected contempt. In the executives of other companies who changed policies after seeing that humanity was profitable. The entire industry was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about how it actually treated people. And in each life touched, the lesson remained crystal clear. The best revenge against prejudice is not to return hate for hate, but to build something so beautiful and successful on a foundation of dignity that it makes prejudice itself obsolete. Not because bad people are punished, but because people, the good ones, prove that there is a better way, and that this better way is more profitable, more sustainable, more humane in every way. Years later, when business students asked Sarah Chen about the secret to Wallace Automotive's success, she always answered the same thing. A 71-year-old man with a ratty coat and wooden cane walked into a dealership and was treated like dirt. He could have retaliated with cruelty, but he chose to prove that success built on dignity is infinitely more powerful than success built on contempt. And in that choice, he changed not just a company, but showed an entire country that kindness is not weakness. It is the business strategy smartest there is. Henry Wallace's story spread far beyond the automotive industry. Hospitals, restaurants, hotels, law firms all began to question whether they too were filtering people based on prejudices disguised as efficiency. And in each transformation, the same pattern emerged. Treating people with dignity was not only morally right, it was absurdly profitable. If this story touched your heart, if you have ever been judged by appearance, if you have ever witnessed injustice and wondered if change is possible, subscribe to the channel, because the lesson that Henry Wallace left is not just about revenge or justice. It's about the transformative power of choosing in every moment of cruelty we witness or experience, not to reciprocate with more cruelty, but to build something so extraordinary that it forces the entire world to evolve. The best revenge is not making your enemies suffer. It's doing something so magnificent with your pain that your enemies have no choice but to either evolve along with you or stay behind. Irrelevant, while you build a better future for everyone. Henry Wallace proved this, and his legacy continues to prove every day in every life he touches that dignity is not a luxury. It is the foundation on which all true success must be built. The best revenge is not destroying those who humiliated you. It's building something so extraordinary that they have no choice but to recognize that they underestimated the wrong person.